Hey, what's going on? Maneli, Jamal here. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at inversions and how to actually apply them over a chord progression. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about inversions and how to kind of piece some scale tones in there as well, to kind of just hit two birds with one stone. In this lesson, we're looking at a much more practical example that we would actually maybe even use in real life in a progression. Okay, so in this first exercise, we'll be looking at a very simple chord progression in the key of E. So we're going to focus on the first finger there, on the first fret of the G, and everything open. So 0 on the high E string and 0 on the B string. Okay, so that's going to be our first chord. A second chord is going to be just the A inversion, which is 2, 2, 0 on strings 1, 2, 3. Then back to E again. Then we're going to go to the 4, 4, 2, which is the B inversion. Okay, so this is very simple. You've probably heard this in a lot of different music. It's a very common chord progression. You can even call it a 1, 4, 5 because that's the intervals, of the actual scale of E. So when we're looking at the E is the 1 chord, A is the 4 chord, and then the B is the 5 chord. So that's where those Roman numeral numbers come from when we're thinking about these chords. Okay, so the first exercise is pretty straightforward because we're just kind of rolling with the thumb on the low E string and then just playing the bass note 3 times. Then we're going to go to the A chord with the A string 4 times, back to the E. Now go to the B chord with the open E as well, and back again to the E. Here we go to the A, and back to the E, and then to the B. And here it is without me announcing the chords. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too difficult for you. In the previous lessons, we did talk about kind of using the bass notes quite a bit, but we haven't actually used them in a progression like this, right? So this is just me doing them in the first positions up here. When I say first positions, I'm just talking about the positions that are closest to each other, which are these 3 inversions. Now again, you can apply this same chord progression over the next set as well. Like if we were to doing it here, over the E here, A, back to the E, to the B. You can even do it over the next inversion as well, which would be this one. This would be the E here, then we would go to the A, back to the E, then to the B, right? So you can use these over all the inversions that we've gone over so far. Just in this first exercise, I'm just really focusing on the first inversions because this is now going to set us up for exercise 2. Now in exercise 2, we're starting to introduce those melodic notes, those scale tones that we talked about in the previous lesson. Now with this very first thing, it's going to be still the 1, 4, 5, same progression. It's going to be E to the A, E to the B. Okay, so it's the same thing. We're just doubling up the bars, so it's going to be 2 bars for each one. So for the very first one, we're going to use the thumb index middle on strings 2, 3, and 6 to kind of pinch them out as a block chord. Now from here, I'm going to use the pinky finger and slide it from 3 to 4, or you can even go from 2nd fret all the way up like this. If that's too difficult of a slide, you can use the 3rd fret and just kind of gently slide into it like that. So we're going to block chord, pinky finger to 4 on the high E string. Now when you play your 2nd finger on the 2nd fret with the open E, then high E. So that's the first bar. First bar sounds like this. Okay, the second bar is very simple because we're just going to go back to the block chord that we did in the first beat of bar 1 and then just play the open E again. So this is the first 2 bars now sound like this. Okay, this is really important, and I'm going to just give you a little bit of a compositional tip here as well. Might as well, since I'm kind of showing you this. Notice the space in the second bar. The second bar is all about space. The first bar is all about the melody. Space is something that I love to use, and a lot of really good composers actually use space to their advantage. Don't think that you need to fill out every single note that you know in the scale. You know, the reason that we learned it in the previous lesson is for me to show you how we can be selective with the notes. But you need to be able to know what notes would actually work in order for us to use this method, you know, accordingly and properly. So I think we need to be very responsible with how we use the scale tone. So notice that we're playing the chord first, melody, open E string melody, and then to the block chord, and then just bass note. Okay? We're letting the melody breathe because the melody is so simple. It's just, all right, if we were to play that without any of the chords or the inversions. So the inversions give it a little bit more life when we just play with the chords. Right, so we can kind of start to see now the power of these inversions in a very musical way. Okay, let's look at the second and the third bar. We're going to just take the index finger there that was already on the first fret of the G string, move it up to the second fret of the G string, and now we've got this. We're going to roll thumb on the A string, index middle on strings 2 and 3. Then we're going to use the ring finger to pluck out the high E string, thumb on the A string, middle finger pluck the B string. So we have this. Then bass note again. Okay, so let's piece together bars 1 to 4. And what would that sound like when we start with the E chord here? Here we go. All right, so we're getting a pretty musical sound already from just that progression. If you remember what it was before, it was just this, right? And then going to the A, and then back. Very powerful already that we're utilizing the individual notes of the inversions. We're holding our fingers there to prepare ourselves to pluck out individual notes that we choose, that we learn to control, and then we make it in a musical fashion like this in a composition. The fifth and the sixth bar are back to the E again, but we're gonna do it differently this time. So here's another compositional tip. If you are ever gonna be repeating a melody, it's very effective to do a variation the second time. The thing is, our brain kind of picks up on and if it's exactly the same. And if it's exactly the same, it almost becomes predictable. And there's nothing wrong with doing that, but I find that there's a little bit more merit to it when we can actually apply just a little bit of variation. And this variation is going to sound like this. When we play this first chord, just as we did before in the very beginning of this section here, we're going to do the slide again, pinky finger slide, but now when we pluck the thumb and the ring finger on strings 1 and 6, we're going to do a hammer-on pull-off with the pinky finger on 4, pull off to 2, and then pull it off to 0. Okay, so it's a little bit of a quick movement here, and this is what it sounds like. Okay, this is a very nice variation that we can incorporate over top of this. If you remember the very first one, it was this. All right, now this one is this one. Okay, now the bar 6 here is going to be exactly the same, which is just going to be pluck the block chord, so index middle on strings 2, 3, and then thumb on the low E string, and then 0. Okay, so this is how this sounds together. Okay, if you're feeling fancy, you can always do a roll on the very first beat. Again, that's another variation that we can add on top, because in the very first bar of this exercise, we actually just did a block chord. This time we can even do that roll if you want to get a little bit more musical with the touch. Okay, so this now leads us into the last 2 bars, which is going to be the B chord. Remember the B inversion here, which was 2, 4, 4 with the open E, right? From here, because we're already in this position from the previous chord, from the E chord, we're going to use the pinky finger and the ring finger from the 2nd fret, and I want you to slide it with the open E, with the low open E. Now from here, I want you to take the index finger, pluck it there on the high E string with the ring finger. Then as you do a pull off to 0, you're gonna pluck the open E as well, like that. Okay, so really slowly. Now from here, you're gonna use the middle finger to pluck the B string. That's already fingered there on the 4th fret. Bass note again on the E string, and then index finger, G string, and then bass note again. So these 2 bars should sound like this. Okay, this is sounding pretty good already. And then once you're here, of course, we can just play from the beginning all the way to the end a couple times and see what that feels like. All right, so there I just ended with the E chord at the very end to give it a little bit of a resolution. It's very common in a lot of music to end and start with the same chord. So if you're ever playing something and you don't know how to end something, have a look at the very first thing that you played. If it is an E chord, it might be a good place to actually end with the E chord as well. It's a very common thing to do, and another little bit of a compositional tip if you are looking to explore that a little bit further. Now, the next lesson I can't wait to share with you because this is where I'm going to be talking about how to incorporate a bass line and a very light percussion with a thumb slap. Now, this is going to be the final chapter of the major inversions that I like to explore within standard tuning within the key of E. Again, so all these lessons over the major inversions are in the key of E, and it's going to just basically show you the building blocks and how each layer kind of builds upon itself. And then eventually we get what we have is probably a song at the end. Because in the next lesson I will be demonstrating to you just a section of a new piece that I'm working on, which actually utilizes these exact same inversions. I also want to let you know that I just released an in-depth online guitar course called Fingerstyle Pro. It takes you from the beginning stages all the way to advanced techniques on how to apply them into your own compositions. Inside Fingerstyle Pro, I've also got lots of tutorials on my own songs like Zaire, Vasat, Synchro Destiny, Cora, Running Fox Trail, and many more. So if you are interested in checking it out, make sure you go to fingerstylepro.com or check out the link in the description down below. Thanks so much for checking out this video, and we'll see you in the next lesson.